Greetings, friend. Welcome to today's Denarius. I'm Ron Thomas. Got a little colorized version of this today. I wanted to get my Chippewa's name in there today. Central Michigan is my alma mater, after all, but that name is familiar in a very important song that was written in 1976 by Gordon Lightfoot. You can probably guess I'm talking about the wreck of the Edmund Fitzgerald. I just want to take this time, this is my moment in time and space, to talk about, in a sense, my own experience with the Edmund Fitzgerald. Started right there. I lived in the Detroit area, and I remember one night, the night before this happened, November 9th, 1975. And you know, right now I got some gales blowing where I live, and you can see them. The winds of November are picking up right here in my area right now. So I thought I wanted to come outside and do this video, and I think the audio will be okay. I have a windscreen on to help the wind not to go too far to hurt the video. But I hope you hear some of it, because it does get pretty loud. But the day was pretty good on November 9th overall of 1975. But toward the evening, the winds started becoming pretty wicked. Now, it's not unusual in November. As a kid, even I knew. We all knew that November was going to bring bad weather at times. It was going to bring unpredictable weather. And you could have 2 or 3 days really nice, or maybe a seeming Indian summer. The next thing you know, you're getting whipped with weather back in low 30s or 20s even at night. That's November. That's kind of what we were used to. But this night was a little different. I had experienced winds, high winds. In November we had where we lived. And this was different. The winds had a very unusual howl. It was moving the street lights very strong. And this was in the not too far early evening. You could see the sun had already set, the glow that came from that orange glow. And it was looking up into the sky, looking around to say, this is eerie. You really wondered. And I did. I don't want to call it necessarily premonition, but I just knew in my heart and mind that something bad's about to happen. Something bad out there is coming. You know, you just had that feeling. And the next morning we woke up, Harry Reasoner on TV and the news talking about a missing ship, the Edmund Fitzgerald, that was thought to have sunk with their 29 crew members in Lake Superior. You know, we never forgot that ship. It just sticks in your mind. It's legendary to many of us who were alive, lived in that Detroit area, and it certainly had become world famous. You know, I don't like the term Titanic of Lake Superior, because it was the largest ship at that particular time of all the cargo ships that existed. But this was a little different, and much different. The Mighty Fitz, as they called her, great name, took her last ride. And it all happened suddenly. Why, after 50 years, is this ship not forgotten? Well, a lot of that, I think, has to do with mystery. It has never been 100% certain to what happened to the end, exactly what happened to the Edmund Fitzgerald. You find some cargo base, you get sampled. How could they not? I mean, you have waves at the time are 35 feet high where she sank. How could it not that they snapped off? Because what was discovered too, that basically those cargo holds that locked them in weren't necessarily strong enough to withstand the type of seas and the winds, which were hurricane force winds, that Edmund Fitzgerald went through that night. You know, I have to tell, I guess, a sea story of my own. And no winds, nothing like the Edmund Fitzgerald. But nevertheless, water is a very powerful source of force, very powerful. Don't mess with water. Don't mess with riptides. Don't do anything like that. But out at sea, 2005, I just got back onto my ship from a different ship that I'd been riding for 28 days, nice calm seas. Got on the ship the next morning, there was a vicious storm at sea. The swells were about 8 to 12 feet high. And I was in the pilot house back where it was my stateroom up there. And the next thing you know, I can throw it into my walls. When I laid on my rack, my feet would go to where my head were. My head would go where my feet were. We were getting tossed, and it was an unexpected storm, and we lost a lot of stuff. I mean, the wardroom was virtually decimated of its dishes, etc. It was a very rough storm. And I got so seasick, and the doc said, hey, head out to the fantail of the ship, sit down there for a little bit, and looking at the horizon will help you. Well, the horizon never helped me with seasickness, not at all. I had to tell him, give me a shot in the rear. That cured the problem. I slept 8 hours like a baby, and it was pretty much over after that. My body adjusted, and the seas had calmed by that time. But nevertheless, water is a hugely powerful force, friends. You don't mess with water. But I learned what it could be like out at sea and being, tossed by swells like that. It was kind of miserable. And it always happens on a Sunday, so I was not able to conduct my church service, chapel service for the sailors that morning. I had somebody stand in for me because I had gotten so sick. But a lot can happen at sea. You don't mess with the water. And Captain Ernest McSorley of the Fitzgerald was a very, as they say, well-seasoned captain, well-experienced, and they say that it was going to be his last ride before retirement. And unexpectedly, his most difficult ride. But I just wanted to kind of let it be known that the Edmund Fitzgerald was something that I've never forgotten for the entirety of a lifetime. Around November, you always think of when the winds start picking up, you think about, no matter where I live, you always think about that ship that went out to Lake Superior and didn't come back. And I really do think, as I said earlier, I think the mystery of it is one thing that has led to the memory. I think the Mariners Chapel in Detroit and what the annual Remembrance is up at Whitefish Bay, I think it is. There are a few places in different states, down in Toledo as well. The Edmund Fitzgerald was a Lake Superior ship taking taconite or iron ore back and forth, hundreds of times throughout the longevity of the ship's life. So various places did the remembrances, the 29 bells, the famous 29 bells that ring annually for the crew members of the Edmund Fitzgerald on November 10th annually. But that has been kind of turned to a ceremony for all the mariners that have been lost through the history of the Edmund Fitzgerald. And I can tell you right now, as the winds, see the gales are picking up here, and moving my iPhone around on the tripod, a recognition now kind of all the mariners that have been lost in Lake Superior through its history. Now, did you know there have been 6,000 wrecks of various types of vessels in the waters of Lake Superior through the years? 6,000. Boy, the Chippewas had it right about the gales of November. And that was around, I would assume men, because men generally went to sea, 30,000 in its history. Lake Superior is a very dangerous lake. Don't mess with the waters at Lake Superior, especially at this time of year. I was stunned by those stats, but I wasn't surprised. You know, the Native Americans of that time, the mighty Chippewas, they had already known. Gitchagumi, the Lake Gitchagumi, the lake that never gives up her dead. Now, the other thing that probably also led to the longevity of the Edmund Fitzgerald being remembered, but there's a kind of a roughish side to this that has to do with the loss, and there's a good side to it as what resulted from what Gordon Lightfoot did in 1976. Gordon Lightfoot I just love Gordon Lightfoot for the entirety of virtually of my life. Just an amazing, amazing man singer. If Bob Dylan can say, whenever I hear a Gordon Lightfoot song, I don't ever want it to end. You know, that's kind of the way I felt about Gordon Lightfoot as well. I banged myself on the head that I missed a chance to see him in San Diego years back. Not too long ago. It was about a year before he passed. But nevertheless, Gordon Lightfoot's song made a huge difference. Yeah, it brought people's attention to the song. So well written, brilliantly described the people, brilliantly described the ship, the people involved, what he said about the captain, the well-seasoned captain, what he said about the cook. That was just out of this world. But talking about Gordon Lightfoot here, Gordon Lightfoot just wrote the perfect song, describing it, the haunting music. You can't, once you hear that music, you can't forget it. You get gripped and pulled into that song immediately when you listen to it. You got to hear it to the end. The lyrics and the music combined. What makes a great song? Well, a great music combined with great lyrics, you got a great song. Greatness. And greatness was Gordon Lightfoot. He just was brilliant in so many ways. I wanted to come out and do this today because this was my time to remember 50 years later, something that has an impression on many people's hearts, not just in the States, in the areas where the ship's demise took place, but really it's become around the world. I can look on YouTube and I see people commenting on the Edmund Fitzgerald around the world very often. And it has left a great imprint because it is one of the great mysteries out there. A mystery that was sung in great fashion. But there's a good side to what Gordon Lightfoot did, and I do want to emphasize this. The number of shipwrecks, there hasn't been one since Gordon Lightfoot sang The Wreck of the Edmund Fitzgerald, since he created it. And that's great, because what happened was, and maybe not, or maybe in part because of this song, after Fitz went down, they took notice and said, we have to take a closer look at the safety features on our ships. The Fitz was considered the strongest, the mightiest on the waters, and it got taken down by the Lake Superior waters. And what caused this to happen? Could there be more? Well, the fact of the matter is, you can look at this picture here. Remember, I said earlier that there have been over 6,000 shipwrecks on Lake Superior. Well, there are other large vessels that suffered demises too on Lake Superior. You can see 3 of them in this picture. One of them is a Fitz, but some gentlemen put a catalog of the major ships that had met their own demise through the years in Lake Superior. But there are so many, and so many of them completely unaccounted for as well. So, yeah, it came time to do a safety check. What can we do to improve the cargo covers, for instance? That was a great change. Cargo covers are not like what they used to be. They are stronger now. Shipbuilding has just improved to help see that something like this doesn't happen again. And the other thing is the weather. The weather is the way it's looked at, the way they did weather, making sure that ships weren't going to be running into storms unexpectedly like the Fitz did. Well, great weather improvements took place as well. And another very important thing, if you notice about the Fitz, the communications went down. And they certainly did much to make those stronger. And as a result, in 50 years, there has not been another shipwreck on Lake Superior. And I can't say, oh, do we have to lose all those men just to get to this point? Well, again, 1975 was a different era. Back in those days, when it came time to get business done, they pushed to get this job done, pushed to get that job done. People might think we do that today, but it was military plus in those days, even the civilian world, the civilian community. And many of those sailors were former military people. And when you're a sailor, you got a mind to get out to sea. When you're on a schedule, you're going to be working to get that ship out to sea or out to sail across the lake, Lake Superior. They all knew that Lake Superior could be a highly dangerous place at this time of year. It was going to be their last voyage of the year. Sometime during November, those ships stop taking their cruises. And that's exactly what the Fitzgerald was, that it was on its last cruise for the year at that point. Unfortunately met her demise. Just take a little time to give you some pictures of the people involved. This picture here is a picture of Edmund Fitzgerald himself. I can't remember if he was real estate. I'm not sure what he was. But that's a picture of the real Edmund Fitzgerald standing below the ship's namesake there. I had to include this because that's the type of iron ore that the Fitz always took in her ship. 26,000 tons that particular day. 26,000 tons, folks. Can you imagine that weight? That's amazing. That is just a marvelous, marvelous painting of the Fitz. I really can't imagine the types of seas, but they were probably similar to the ones in this particular painting. That's just a beautiful picture. And this is a picture of where the ship sank. Credit to the Detroit Free Press for that, but it's said that the service measured 58-mile-per-hour winds and that the waves were about 30 feet high. She was 17 miles away from Whitefish Point, of course, with 29 men aboard. She left from Duluth. This is one scary picture in a way. The Edmund Fitzgerald left port. Weather was said to be one of the special days on Lake Superior. Just ripples of water, sunny and warm for November. That's why I said the day was nice on November 9th, 1975. But it became wicked pretty early when the evening started. The wind started growing stronger, stronger, and stronger as it went on. Within 24 hours, the freighter would be lashed into a violent storm, which the sailors called the Witch of November. Within 36 hours, Edmund Fitzgerald went to the bottom of the lake. This is a sad one, too. The last time I talked with him, he said he was holding his own. The last words that came from the Edmund Fitzgerald, that came from Captain McSorley's radio contact with Bernie Cooper of the Arthur Anderson. That's a heartbreaking thing to see. The last words, we're holding our own. You got a sense from those words that I think McSorley maybe knew the end was coming. And it came very shortly after that as Fitzgerald disappeared from the radar screen. This is the Edmund Fitzgerald Memorial Sculpture at Whitefish Point, Michigan. Now the ship actually sank on the Canadian side. And as you can see, there's a Canadian leaf there. Talking about her, but it wasn't far. The ship went down not far from this area. It said it was 17 miles from shore when she sank. She just wasn't able to make shelter. And at that point in time, it was an area where the conditions of the sea were among the worst it experienced on the entire journey. And it took it down. Now the bell, the bell itself was removed from the ship on explorations that took place for a little while. They didn't last real long. The family does not to this day want explorations on the Fitz. In addition to that, and I'm glad, I agree with them. It's a graveyard. When ships like that, whether they're military vessels like the USS Johnston, the Sammy B, whether they be the USS Arizona, the only reason why we'd go under in the water in the Arizona is to rest crew members there, inter them there. But there are no explorations on the Arizona. It's not a typical graveyard. It's a graveyard we don't touch anymore. And there have been enough expeditions and things like that. The family said, please no more. And they granted them the permission to bring the ship's bell up, which was a very, very great gesture. And the Edmund Fitzgerald Bell sits at Whitefish Point, and it is called the Great Lakes Shipwreck Museum. That would be fascinating to see. It really would. And there have been so many of them. That's a beautiful picture there of the Edmund Fitzgerald. The mighty Fitz, getting ready to go out to sea. Maybe she's coming to port, but I don't see the fancy flags up. Probably headed out to sea, headed out to go across the Great Lakes. Being a former sailor, a sea's a sea, whether it's a lake, a lake or not. Beautiful, beautiful ship. All in all, many of us to this day remain touched by the Edmund Fitzgerald. And I'll just go ahead and leave you with some pictures that I've taken. They've been across the internet. I think many of them are beautiful. And, you know, even as the gales pick up again around here, the winds, I'm inland, I wanted to come outside and do this today, especially because the hard winds just kicked in on November 10th. And I thought it'd be the best place to do it, to create my video outdoors today. And I'm so glad I did. But this is the saddest part. I can't leave this without leaving you with a chance, and I'll post this in the music section too. These are the names of those who were lost in the wreck of the Edmund Fitzgerald. And of course, the one who should be on top is Captain Ernest M. McSorley. So let's go ahead and honor these men in the way they should be honored. And Captain Ernest M. McSorley should be honored number one, because there's no doubt in the world this captain did the best he could to save that ship, as did the 28 others who we lost on the wreck of the Edmund Fitzgerald. Well, friends, thank you for watching Today's Denarius. These are just some of the things that I wanted to share. I wish my premonition had been wrong that day. You know, I wish we weren't talking 50 years later about the Edmund Fitzgerald. I wish all those men would have had marvelous and wonderful lives. But at least they do live in a legacy, you know, and even in their loss, the good thing that is that it has probably saved others' lives, others who go out on Lake Superior and challenge those waters by going in cargo ships across the waters, as you can understand. So take a watch of the pictures, and I do want to say thank you so much for watching Today's Denarius. It's a blessing to create this particular video. I've been wanting to talk about this for a long time, but what a better time than on the 50th anniversary of the demise of the Edmund Fitzgerald. Well, having said that, I want to say thank you for watching Today's Denarius. I do know that Veterans Day is coming up, and I want to say along to my fellow vets out there, have a happy Veterans Day. I certainly look forward to going out and doing some visits at stores and going out there and getting some good food on Veterans Day. Appreciate it, people of our country, with the businesses that open that up to us. And Thanksgiving's coming up. I hope I can get a video out by then. I certainly probably will, because I do the Thanksgiving prayer every year. So that will probably be the next Today's Denarius video. Well, God bless you. Appreciate you for watching this remembrance of the Edmund Fitzgerald. I'm Ron Thomas, and may God richly bless you.